Hello friends, you are welcome again the Listening Empire. The Jerusalem is one of the most sacred cities on earth, as the author of Jerusalem points out. It's the only city that exists both in the realm of humans and in the idea of paradise for believers of these three major religions. Jerusalem is essentially heaven on earth. However, this shared reverence is also the root of much conflict. All three religions believe that Jerusalem should belong to them, and this has led to endless wars and strife over the past millennium. The city's tumultuous history even predates the founding of Christianity and Islam. So why is the Middle East so volatile? Much of it traces back to the Jerusalem question. The book's author, Simon Sagmunier, is a British scholar from the University of Cambridge and a fellow at the Royal Society of Literature. He has a unique connection to Jerusalem. His ancestors were among the first to establish a Jewish residential area outside the old city. The book gained immediate acclaim upon release, endorsed by influential figures like Bill Clinton and Henry Kissinger, the latter being a prominent Jewish figure. It's also received rave reviews from reputable publications like Newsweek and The Economist, won numerous literary awards, and has been translated into 35 languages. Essentially, it's been a global hit. So why is this book so well received? It's because the history of Jerusalem is long and incredibly complex. Being able to articulate it clearly is an achievement in itself, let alone doing so in a way that's both impartial and engaging. What can we gain from reading this book? First, it offers a comprehensive understanding of Jerusalem's 3,000-year history, providing a framework to understand the cause and effect of its past and present. Second, this framework helps us better understand current international issues, particularly in the Middle East. Lastly, as the saying goes, history should be read from a macro perspective, and the long and intricate history of Jerusalem gives us plenty of insights to ponder. Let's dive in and explore together. If we were to summarize the intricate and tumultuous 3,000-year history of Jerusalem in one sentence, it would be three stakeholders fighting over property rights. These stakeholders are the Jews, Christians, and Muslims. While the city has changed hands many times throughout history, these three groups have been the primary claimants. The book Jerusalem is structured chronologically, focusing on these religious groups in turn, and that's how we'll discuss it too, examining each group's background, their relationship with Jerusalem, and the property dispute among them. First, let's give a brief overview of the disputed property, or Jerusalem itself. The city is located at a crossroads of ancient civilizations, nestled between Mesopotamia to the east, Egypt to the south, and the Hellenistic world to the west. Its strategic location made it a prime spot for settlement. It's surrounded by mountains, making it easily defensible, and has natural springs, making it habitable. People have lived there for about 7,000 years, and the term Salem appeared in records around 4,000 years ago, marking perhaps the foundation of Jerusalem. However, the city was initially quite weak, often paying tribute to stronger entities like the pharaohs of Egypt. Various tribes and nations conquered and ruled Jerusalem over time. Among them were the Jews, our first stakeholder, who initially arrived in Canaan, modern-day Israel, and Palestine between the 20th and 15th centuries BC. They later became enslaved in Egypt, only to be led back to Canaan by their leader Moses in the 13th century BC. Successive leaders expanded their territory, and by the 11th century BC, King David defeated the Philistines, unifying the region and establishing Jerusalem as the capital of the ancient kingdom of Israel. Judaism, the religion of the Jews, sees Jerusalem as its spiritual center. After King David, his son Solomon built the first temple on Mount Zion, solidifying Jerusalem's status as a holy city in Judaism. Despite these accomplishments, the Jews were not particularly powerful. After Solomon's death, the kingdom split, and they were subjected to invasions, notably by the Babylonians in 586 BCE, who destroyed the first temple. It wasn't until Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon that the Jews were allowed to return and build the second temple. Interestingly, modern-day Iran, ancient Persia, once had good relations with the Jews, a stark contrast to the current tension between Iran and Israel, and so the Jews established themselves as the first official residents of Jerusalem. However, their grip on the city has been tenuous, at best subjected to various conquests and changes in rule. After the era of Solomon, the Jewish people continued to face difficult times. Conquered first by Alexander the Great and then by his successors, they turned to their faith for spiritual sustenance, and Jerusalem's status as a holy city became increasingly significant to them. Things took a turn in 66 BCE when the Romans arrived and conquered the region, renaming it Palestine after the Ines, ironically the very people King David had defeated. For the Jews this was a devastating period, casting a cloud of uncertainty over their future, but for Jerusalem a new chapter was about to unfold. The city was on the verge of becoming not just a sacred site for the Jews but for people all over Europe. This transition was due to the emergence of our second stakeholder, the Christians. When talking about Christians, one cannot overlook Jesus Christ, a Jew born in Bethlehem near Jerusalem, although traditionally said to be born in the year 1 CE. Current scholarly consensus places his birth around 4 BCE. During his time, the Jewish religious elite had grown corrupt. Many Jews were discontent with Roman rule and the puppet leaders Rome had placed in charge, such as the infamous Herod family. Jesus emerged as a voice of opposition to the Jewish priestly class, offering unique religious teachings. According to the book, Jesus was primarily concerned with the world after the end days, advocating not for a nationalist revolt against Rome but for a focus on the eternal life of the soul. His teachings, encapsulated in famous sermons like the Sermon on the Mount, emphasized that the meek would inherit the kingdom of heaven. Jesus' wisdom and teachings attracted many followers, which alarmed the Jewish religious elite. They felt that the rise of this new sect could challenge their authority. Collaborating with Pontius Pilate, the Roman governor of Jerusalem, they accused Jesus of insurrection. This led to the well-known events of Jesus' betrayal by Judas, his crucifixion and death around 33 CE. Some sources say 29 CE. In a place in Jerusalem known as Golgotha, the Jewish leaders thought the crucifixion of Jesus would put an end to the disturbance. However, they were wrong. Jesus' disciples continued to spread his teachings not just in their homeland, but also across the Mediterranean, reaching as far as Rome. Thus, Christianity was born. The city of Jerusalem, where these momentous events unfolded, became sacred not just for Jews, but also for an entirely new religious community, the Christians. Two significant events shaped Jerusalem following the emergence of Christianity. The first was the Jewish revolt against Roman rule in 66 CE, known as the Jewish War, which ended in brutal suppression. The second was in 130 CE, when Roman Emperor Hadrian decided to dismantle Jerusalem and build a Roman city in its place, expelling the Jews. Despite unsuccessful revolts, the Jews dispersed across Europe and the Middle East, though some remained in Jerusalem. The city was no longer exclusively theirs, but it continued to hold a special place in their hearts. Meanwhile, early Christians faced their own challenges. They were often persecuted until 313 CE, when Roman Emperor Constantine legalized Christianity. By the time of his death in 337 CE, he had converted to Christianity, solidifying its place as the dominant religion in Europe, given Jerusalem's significance in the life, crucifixion, and, according to Christian belief, the resurrection of Jesus. The city also became a holy site for Christians. Unlike Judaism, which is primarily ethnic, Christianity spread across various ethnicities in Europe. However, this created a problem. European Christians blamed Jews for the crucifixion of Jesus, which led to anti-Semitic sentiments from Constantine's era. For the next several centuries, Jerusalem remained under Roman and later Byzantine control. For Christians worldwide, the city became a religious and spiritual haven, making them the second stakeholders of Jerusalem. The third key group to enter the scene was the Muslims, followers of Islam, founded by Muhammad in the 7th century. Although Islam's two most sacred cities, Mecca and Medina, are in present-day Saudi Arabia, Jerusalem is considered their third holiest site. According to his Islamic tradition, Muhammad was transported to Jerusalem during the night journey, further elevating the city's religious status. The rise of Islam was tightly linked to the emergence of the Arab Empire under the Caliphate of Umar, the second caliph. The Arabs captured Jerusalem, bringing it under Muslim control. So there you have it. The Jews, Christians, and Muslims are the three main stakeholders of Jerusalem. All regard the city highly and conduct various religious activities there. However, their conflicting claims have led to tensions. While the Jews were the weaker party and thus less of a threat, the Christians and Muslims were substantial powers unwilling to yield. This tension eventually erupted into the Crusades in the 11th century, a series of conflicts lasting over 200 years. In 1095, Pope Urbano called for a crusade to reclaim Jérusalem, marquing participant. With a cross over 2 centuries, there were 8 major crusades targeting Jerusalem. The first crusade succeeded in capturing the city in 1099, establishing The Kingdom of Jerusalem, however, this victory was marred by the mass slaughter of approximately 50,000 to 60,000 Muslim and Jewish civilians, an act that still fuels animosity today. In 1187, Muslim leader Saladin recaptured Jerusalem, notably sparing Christian civilians. European powers made several more attempts to retake the city but failed. By 1291, the Mamluk dynasty of Egypt had effectively ended the era of the Crusades. Later, the Ottoman Turks defeated the Mamluks and took control of Jerusalem, but as both were Muslim, they could be seen as the same stakeholder. During this period, Europe was preoccupied with the Renaissance, maritime exploration, the Protestant Reformation, and the Industrial Revolution. Religious fervor waned and attention shifted away from Jerusalem. This remained the status quo until the 19th century, when a weakening Ottoman Empire lost effective control over the city, while European empires from Napoleon's France to Tsar's Russia, i.e. Jerusalem, none could claim it. However, the city did become a cultural hub, drawing figures like Gogol, Flair, Melville, and Mark Twain. Meanwhile, a quiet movement was taking shape. The Jewish people, the first stakeholders, were planning their return to reclaim Jerusalem. More than 1,800 years after being expelled, their efforts would soon come to fruition, adding yet another chapter to the complex history of this ancient city. After enduring centuries of persecution and displacement, the Jewish people decided that enough was enough. Their sufferings, they included, stemmed from not having a nation of their own and living under other people's rule. This gave rise to Zionism, a movement aiming to establish a Jewish homeland. In 1897, Zionists convened in Switzerland and adopted a program advocating the establishment of such a homeland. The location, Jerusalem, the city their ancestors had once called home. This movement gained traction across Europe, capturing the attention of major powers. During World War I, both Britain and Germany found themselves in a stalemate and sought external help. Britain eyed the financial and organizational prowess of the Zionists, and in 1917 issued the Balfour Declaration, named after then Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. This document pledged British support for a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. The wording was intentionally vague, sowing seeds for future disputes. After World War I, the Ottoman Empire disintegrated, and regions including modern-day Israel and Palestine came under British mandate. Jewish communities worldwide began relocating to Palestine, establishing settlements. However, Palestine was not uninhabited. It was home to many Arab communities. These residents were none too happy about vacating their homes for the original landowners, whose claims, they argued, were over a millennium-old. Tensions escalated between Arabs and Jews, both of whom also resented British rule. Arabs demanded the repeal of the Balfour Declaration and restrictions on Jewish immigration, stalling the establishment of a Jewish state. In 1937, Britain proposed a two-state solution with separate nations for Jews and Arabs in Jerusalem under international administration. Arab leaders vehemently rejected the plan, leaving the issue unresolved. Around the same time, Adolf Hitler came to power in Germany, initiating a new wave of anti-Semitic atrocities and eventually World War II. Also in the period between the two world wars, the world underwent an energy revolution, shifting from coal to oil as its primary fuel. The Middle East, largely under Arab and Muslim control, became crucial for its oil reserve. This forced Britain and other major powers to pivot their support towards the Arabs, tightening restrictions on Jewish immigration to Palestine and straining relations with the Jewish community. After World War II ended in 1945, the atrocities committed by the Nazis against the Jewish people were brought to light. The world was horrified, and sympathy for the Jewish cause grew, especially in the United States, which had emerged as the world's leading power. Pressured by global opinion, Britain could no longer hold back the tide. In 1947, the United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution to establish both a Jewish and an Arab state in Palestine, with Jerusalem to be administered internationally. In 1948, British forces withdrew from Palestine, and on May 14 of that year, the Jewish community declared the founding of a new nation, Israel, reviving the anti-Zionist name once used by their ancestors. However, the Arab nations didn't approve of the UN's plan and were even less willing to accept the establishment of Israel. This led to the outbreak of the First Arab-Israeli War, which lasted until March 1949. At the end of the conflict, Israel controlled more territory than initially granted by the UN resolution, essentially making the war a losing venture for the Arabs in Jerusalem. Jordan's king, Abdullah the Farber, took control of the Old City and the area extending to the west bank of the Jordan River. Meanwhile, Israel held the western part of Jerusalem. This territorial division persisted until the Six-Day War in 1967, when Israel took control of the entire city, although the original divisions were later re-established. Today, Jerusalem is divided into 4 distinct quarters: a Muslim quarter in the east, a Jewish quarter in the south, a Christian quarter in the northwest, and an Armenian quarter in the southwest. While a certain balance has been struck between Israel and Palestine, the situation remains precarious, frequently erupting into conflicts. The 20th century alone saw 5 major Arab-Israeli wars, with the book in question covering events up until the end of the Six-Day War in 1967. The book Jerusalem provides a comprehensive overview of the city's history and its shifting ownership, offering valuable context for understanding the ongoing tensions in the Middle East. To sum it up using the book's metaphor, Jerusalem is an old house with a 3,000-plus year history, and it has seen 3 primary tenants. First came the Jews, the original homeowners, who built the temple there over 3 millennia ago, making the city sacred in their eyes. They were expelled by the Romans about 2 millennia ago, scattering primarily across Europe and the Middle East. Then about 600 to 700 years ago, the Romans converted to Christianity, and recognizing the city's religious significance due to Jesus's ministry and crucifixion, there became the second tenants of Jerusalem. About 400 years ago, Islam was founded, and Muslims who consider the city holy due to Muhammad's night journey took over, becoming the third tenants. Nearly 1,000 years ago, the Christian second tenants grew restless and decided to reclaim Jerusalem, leading to the Crusades. The Christians did regain control for a time, but were eventually pushed back to Europe. Finally, the original Jewish tenants, tired of their diasporic existence, decided to return to their ancestral home about a century ago, with support from Britain and the US, and taking advantage of the geopolitical shifts brought about by the world wars, they successfully established the State of Israel in 1948. However, the Muslim tenants who had been residing in the area for nearly 800 years opposed this move, leading to ongoing conflicts from 1948 to the present day. 5 major wars have been fought over this old house, with neither Jews nor Muslims gaining full control. A portion is also still held by Christians. The second tenants. The property dispute remains unresolved, impeding the achievement of peace in the Middle East. So after hearing all this, do you feel like you've gained a better understanding of the history of Jerusalem and the complexities of the Middle East? That's the main takeaway from this book. Thank you. I hope you like a video.